What is going on, everybody? Host again. Glad to be back. I'm excited to have a guest today. We went through a little run of not so many guests. I still like those times. We're able to sit back and talk about, just different things from my experience, from some of our clients' experience. And I guess that gives me a little bit of an advantage because I work with so many different businesses and get to hear their stories and try to help them. And that's what we're able to do. But today I've got a guest with me. I want to welcome in Peter Busch. And Peter, I just appreciate you being here. And I know, want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was you. We had a couple of reschedules,
Yep.
just trying to work schedules out, things like that. The beginning of the year is always a challenging time for everyone with holidays and travels and just different things. So I'm glad that you notched out some time for us today to talk to our audience about who you are and what you do. On this podcast, it is what it is. It's growth, grit, grind. We like to talk to entrepreneurs and business leaders about kind of their journey from the beginning of their entrepreneur journey through what they did in the beginning. As we all know, as entrepreneurs, that shifts and it changes and it evolves. Sometimes the way we want it to, and a lot of times the way we don't want it to. But we're able to overcome some of those things and, push forward. And so I want to talk to you about your story and kind of where you come from and what you're doing now, because honestly, man, you've got some just cool stuff. Going through your bio and reading that, I'm like, man, there's some stuff here that I recognize. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So
it's been a journey for sure.
Yeah, well, that's life, right? Like some journeys are longer than others, and I joke with people when I talk to them. I'm like, I'm about to have a birthday in a few days, and I'm like, it's another year. Just at this point, I've got a 16-year-old, I've got a kid, I've been married for almost 18 years. It's just another year, but there are pieces of life that you look at and you go, man, I'm mid 30s, teetering on the other side of 30s now. And I was like, man, some days I wake up and it's like, they're like, you're only as old as you feel. And I'm like, today it's 67. Today is, or 76. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
We all live that life though. But so tell me a little bit, I want to give a little bit of context and I want you to be able to run with it. The first part of your bio that I saw is you spent 25 years in the entertainment industry, which I think for our audience would be really cool. You're the first unique guest that I think we've had that's really been in kind of the entertainment space, and that your business and your journey was in that entertainment space. So give us a little bit of context there. Let us know, like 25 years, it's a lifetime for some folks. So tell us a little bit about, what that journey looked like over the 25 years. What were you doing?
Yeah, originally, so I was born and raised in Denver, and didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life, but then got into, in high school, our video year. We had a video yearbook, and so started editing videos together. I was big into sports, and we cut together these like sports videos and played them back at a pep rally, and I enjoyed entertaining people, and I was like, yeah, maybe I could do that. In Colorado, basically, there was only University of Colorado had a film school, but I was like, well, maybe I'll set my sights on California and look to go out there and get a job in the entertainment industry. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but my dad, basically, the only thing he said is, Dad, don't go and be a director. There's only one director on a film. Please go get a set of skills to, do other things and have some job security.
Very much a dad talk. I like it.
Oh, it totally was. And it's totally smart wisdom at the end of the day. And so I went out to film school, Chapman University, and it really broad strokes. I was an editing major at one point. I ended up in what at the time was new media. So this was like the early 2001. And new media was like 3D animation, web design. It was like this catch-all of anything non-filmmaking. And they didn't quite know, even the school didn't know what to do with the program. But my sophomore year, that's why I've been working for so long. My sophomore year, I didn't want to work on student films over and over again. So I said, well, let me try to get an internship. So I had two internships, really interesting paths. I had an internship offer at Warner Brothers Feature Animation, and I wasn't huge into animation. I loved cartoons growing up, but I wasn't like looking for that. And then the other one was on True Hollywood Story, which would have been awesome, but the job would have been kind of a drag. You're just logging tapes, hours and hours of tapes, and animation kind of seemed fun. So I got into Warner Feature Animation and ended up working on the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. And I was the seventh person hired on the film. And basically the internship program was attached to production management. So I was working with the producers of the film and production manager of the film. So I kind of ended up in these management roles. So I worked on the SpongeBob movie for 4 years, and
wow.
Got to go to Korea and see where the actual animation was done. I got to actually scan in the original Post-it. It was a Post-it note that Steve Hillenburg drew of SpongeBob. And so, like, and I'm a kid, I didn't know what I had, and so I like scanned it in for like the DVD, like the behind the scenes special stuff. But just a wonderful experience. Like that whole crew was just amazing. But I really got to learn the ins and outs of 2D animation. And then I ended up in 3D. So that whole production crew from SpongeBob was under Paramount, and then we moved to San Clemente. The entire group moved to San Clemente, California. This was up in LA, and San Clemente is about 60 miles away, halfway between LA and San Diego. And we worked on a 3D animated movie. So this was 2004, 2005. So we're only less than 10 years from Toy Story, right? So 3D animation was sort of an emerging field. We knew all the principles of 2D animation. They've been making 2D movies for literally 100 years.
Right.
And so, but the process hadn't really moved over to 3D animation. They knew how to animate. There were some good animation packages, but they didn't know all the rendering and what we call texturing, which is all the materials and making, characters look like characters in fur and wood and metal and all that stuff. So I was the asset manager on this 3D animated movie, which was, there's thousands of assets. It's all the props, environments, characters, all of that needs to be created by artists. So I managed a team of about 15 artists to create all these assets and push them through a pipeline and a process and push this animated film called Barnyard out. So a lot of that was sort of combining 3D artists, so literally right brain creative people, with this kind of technical engineering process, which is kind of what I love about entertainment. Is you're generally combining the left and the right brain and bringing these together.
Right.
So I got off that project, went backpacking around Europe for 6 months, and then when I started looking for my next job, I found somebody that I had worked with, and they were at a technology company called Image Metrics, and it was like early AI technology, I'll say. So at the time, they were calling it machine learning and computer vision. That didn't make sense to me. It was like computer vision. It's like literally engineers slapping two words together. But it's really actually what happens under the hood on how all this technology works is you feed a computer a bunch of images, and then it kind of learns what to see, and you tell it what to look at, like what a face looks like, and these kind of things.
Do you think most people realize that AI was in development that early? Like everyone's talking about it now, but do you really think that like people realize? I mean, even you mentioned Toy Story. Thinking about Toy Story as a kid, I mean, I was a kid when that came out, and it seemed now looking back so ahead of its time. I mean, obviously it did very well and created a huge franchise, but it just seemed when you compared it to other things that were out there, and I don't know how you looked at it back then, probably being a fan of just knowing how it was all put together. It seemed like that the technology that was there to do that, it was just kind of almost unheard of. You hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah, I mean, all this research predates me. I mean, Image Metrics had been around since the late 90s, and they were doing sort of these machine learning research. And it was really like, can we feed a computer a bunch of images that are what's called annotated? You basically will, tell it where a face is or tell it where a tree is or whatever, right? And if you feed it enough images with trees, then a computer kind of knows what a tree looks like, right? When you feed it a new image, it's like, find the tree, right? That's the fundamentals of how this stuff works. And there's lots of evidence all over the place. I mean, that's how autocorrect basically knows how to autocorrect your words, right? I mean, it's fed on data and things like that. And most people don't realize it's already been a part of their life for years and years and years.
Right.
The emergence, I mean, we get into, when ChatGPT hit, right? I mean, that became, I think, really the lightning rod for people to like see the usefulness. I mean, it was really when you first heard about Google, right? I remember the class I was in college, right? I mean, it's the idea that this technology that's so powerful, it's ubiquitous for literally anything you could use it for. And I think that's where there's this tipping point where now it's sort of widespread and taking over. But I kind of stumbled into entrepreneurship, right? When I was at this technology company, is they basically kept hiring salespeople to go and sell, right? That was like the thing, just go sell the tech, because the tech sells itself. And like, no, because I came from this management background, and so when I was at this Image Metrics, it was a pure tech company, and they offered their services to the entertainment industry. But ultimately, when I put together a business plan, I was like, I think there's a better way to run this as a business, not as a tech company. It needs to solve problems. And it sounds simple, but I see a lot in tech that just because it can do something doesn't mean it should. And it's not solving a problem. There's not a fundamental underlying business. Well, we basically helped animate characters faster. That was the fundamental problem that we were solving, is like for a video game where you have 100,000 lines of dialogue to animate when you walk around Grand Theft Auto, and you can talk to anybody, like somebody's got to create all that animation. we had this technology that could just basically use video of an actor and then create animation on a character really quickly. And so I put together a business plan, which was a variety of, I had never written a business plan before. I didn't go to business school. I literally was like, hey, internet, teach me the sections that I need for,
If only you had Chat GPT
for this
back then, it
plan.
could have
Oh
written the
man, it
whole
would have
thing
been,
for
I mean, it probably took me, I'm guessing 2 or 3 months, and it was a
Yeah.
12-page. I
Wow.
mean, it was just kind of a thought analysis of like all the
Sure.
sections I need for, marketing and, what's the business model, revenue, all the things you would expect to be in there. But it was just this, I have this idea. Let me just put it through its paces and, round it out. Send it to my CEO. I'm like, I think there's a better way to do this thing. And he loved it because it kind of did his job for him a little bit.
Yeah,
And
a
he's
little
like,
bit.
let's spin this out as its own company. We'll put some cash into it. So you guys have, 4 months of runway. So we had
Okay.
6 people when we went out as a founding group, and we knew that like as soon as that cash run out, we're out of work. Like that's it.
Right.
We figure it out kind of thing. But we were a startup, but we started with cash, clients, and product, which is literally everything. Now
Yeah.
realizing that. But it was this really healthy emerging time. Like we kind of painted a picture of what kind of business we wanted to be. What do we need to build to sort of firm up our product to get it out there and release it is best way I would describe it. And so that first year was a challenge. I mean, first 2 years were a huge challenge. We pivoted business models 3 times,
Yeah.
right? Just to get traction and to sort of
Was
price
it from
things
the
out.
market? Was it from the market where you out actively like pitching it, presenting it, and then the feedback was like, okay, scrap that, they don't like it, or it's not working, or pricing, or whatever it was? What made you pivot there?
It was the revenue model. So the product itself worked. It was a plug-in for animators to basically feed in a
Okay.
video, track it, and then apply that motion onto their animated character. So the
Gotcha.
product worked.
Yeah.
But what we were charging for is to use it by the second,
Oh,
which
wow.
is kind of a service-based model. So in a
Yeah.
service, people would send us video, we'd send them animation. So you send us 10 minutes of video, we charge you for 10 minutes of data. That service-based model allowed us to keep our biggest customers like Bungie. They were doing all the Halo and Reach
Yep.
and all these other titles. So we sort of transitioned those accounts over so that they didn't have to change their budgets and stuff. But then it didn't
Right.
scale. We couldn't grow beyond those 5 accounts. So then software is basically, at the time, this was before subscriptions and SaaS and all this stuff,
Right.
was a license fee. You just paid like a one-time license fee, and then you could use it in perpetuity. And it had different types of licenses and stuff like that.
Sure.
So we pivoted from a service-based model, which is basically a usage-based model, which doesn't make
Mhm.
sense when you're creating a script for a video game. You don't know how much content you need.
Right.
So you couldn't budget for it. It didn't scale. So then we switched to a licensing-based model. And then it was exponentially scaled. Well, that was around 2014. And that's at about the same time Adobe launched. I don't know if you guys, people remember when they first launched an all-in subscription. I think it was $50 or $60 for literally all their apps. And before you were paying like $600, I think, for whatever
For
version
one.
of everything
Yeah.
for one. And it was like, so you're like $50 for everything. Like, how's this going to work?
Take my money.
And so, flipped the table. Everybody didn't quite know. And you had these big companies like Autodesk that, they make all this animation software. They kind of had to split to hedge their bets and kind of price things 2 different ways.
Mhm.
But the market was really what was driving us to sort of pivot, and like, what was the expected pricing model for whatever we had as a product, which seems straightforward and simple, but we kind of had to figure that out. We were not,
Sure.
we were lots of product people, like people that had animation backgrounds and things like that. We didn't have all the, resources at that time. We were still very small and in our infancy.
Right. No, I think I mean, I think we all go through that, and I can only, of course, use myself. I mean, I use some of our clients as examples too, but it's like us even, we get in that point where we operate, I guess you'd call it like a traditional agency, like we operate on a retainer basis, a client covers ad spend, things like that, depending on what they're wanting to do. But anytime you're wanting to pivot, I mean, we started our business in a smaller town. There wasn't a whole lot of options for people. So like, I don't want to say we had the ability to just set whatever pricing we wanted to, because we really didn't, because we were dealing with initially a lot of mom and pop, maybe small to medium sized businesses. And our approach was, we know how much the agencies in Dallas and Frisco, Texas are charging. Like, we know their minimum retainer is $10,000 plus, they won't even talk to them, so for us, we wanted to create that avenue, but then expanding, adding team members, adding softwares, doing all these different things, you get sit back and go, wait a minute, like, I spent all my money. I spent all my money. Like I've got to find, but it still has to make sense. Is like, and I think as a business owner and as one of the leaders, we sit back and sometimes people think that we have it all figured out. But if they came into the office some days, it's just kind of our head against the wall and we're trying to, or it's spaghetti to the wall. Sometimes it's just like, let's see what kind of sticks, but it is thought out. I mean, you're thinking it out. And like you said, really trying to figure out, you're watching the market too, which I think was a key thing you said there is like the market sometimes dictates what you're going to do. Is
Oh,
that the
they
market tells you, hey, we can't be number one. You guys were smaller, we're getting started and getting a name for yourself, but you didn't have the name yet. So it's like these guys like Autodesk, they have a name. Adobe has a
yeah,
name. And so they come out and they're the leaders, regardless of how good or bad it is or effective, but they set the precedent. And then you kind of fall in line with are we a premium service? Are we a better mousetrap? What do we present it as? And not only is it shifting business models and revenue models, but it's shifting really how you present it too. Like you have to
for
shift
sure.
everything. So yeah, I'll let you continue because this is good.
Yeah, no, I mean it's I mean at the end of the day I did a ton of research on like I get asked this all the time. I've ended up in my career consulting for a lot of businesses. I've been on this
Sure.
great TV show called The Blocks and two
I'm
seasons,
familiar
and
with
there's
that.
like 70 to 100 different businesses in all walks of life. And I just love it because all the things that I've learned in tech on basically what not to do, I have all this wisdom and knowledge. So I really enjoy it. And pricing is one of these like really interesting things. And it's like, well, how do you price something that's new, right? That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't exist, doesn't have a precedent. And it's like, well, what it would, I mean, fundamentally, you should price out what feels like the right price. Your intuition is usually right as a
Yeah.
business owner. And you also have these magical words called introductory pricing, right? Which is gives
I
you this
like the
freedom to basically, hey, we're going to roll this out, jump on this bandwagon as soon as you can. Likely the price will go up as soon as people realize what we have.
right.
Um, but you also like we were talking about Adobe and Autodesk. You have other players that have set precedent on what kind of pricing structure makes sense for your business. What are your customers expecting? How do they budget for your products and services?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What are they expecting to pay? Because you have to sort of get outside your own four walls and know there's a value. And it's like fundamentally, this is always what I have to go through with a business. Like, what problem do you solve? Right? What is the current solution? And your problem is being solved some way. It's not like you're inventing time travel, right? It's
Right.
like some way your problem's being solved. And how do people pay for that current solution?
Mm-hmm.
What are they paying? How much are they paying? Is it a subscription? Is it a one-off service? Like whatever that is, and how much literal dollars are they paying? Then you can correlate it to your own model, right?
Right.
And like, are you saving them time and money? And do they know they have a problem? Is another fundamental question,
Yeah.
because if they don't know, then you got a big awareness challenge and all these other things. But um, I enjoy the strategy of it. So that's sort of where my career has ended up is as a chief strategic officer. And strategy you literally apply to every area of the company, right? On how do you go to market? How do you build your products? When do you build your products? How do you hire your people? How do you retain your people? Like all
Right.
of these things matter on how you scale your company. And so
Yeah.
FaceWare, we started, with a small loan and 5 people. Well, we scaled to 4,000 customers in 90 countries,
It's
right?
awesome.
Because and we weren't a major, like massive company, 60 people,
Right.
right? So, but with software, you can have that kind of scale. But how do you
Absolutely.
get to all these markets? We grew through partnerships and we grew through sales channels, and we built this really big sales ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of automated it. We had 6 to 10 new accounts per day for 10 years.
Wow.
Like the
That's
lead
big.
gen is insane. It was insane, and we
Yeah.
knew we kind of we I think we underperformed at the end of the day when we sold in April of 21. I think we could have been 10x bigger than what we ended up doing. I think we
Sure.
didn't maximize the opportunity, but
Yeah.
learned a ton. Learned, I mean, literally every way to how to build and scale a business. So
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so I mean, that was a good challenge. I mean, and I always like to ask those questions. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Is that just we don't have to go back there, but you had to pivot, you had to change, you had to do that. I mean, and obviously hindsight in businesses and life is 2020. You go back and you look and go, could have done this, could have done that, could have waited, could have done things a little bit differently, could have evaluated better, could have done all these things. But what happened from there? So, I mean, obviously you guys sold, is that, I'm getting that correct? You sold FaceWare Technologies, and that was what year?
April of 21.
21. Okay. So not too long ago. So did you, What was the pivot point there? Were you like, you know what, I'm going to go sit on a beach for 6 months, or like, or did you know, what did you do from there? Were you already working on the next thing? And I guess just walk us through that, whatever that transition period looked like.
Yeah, so it was, I mean, it was a 3-month contract originally and turned into a 17-year career. So
Yeah,
it was kind of a its time moment, and we had been looking for suitors for a while.
sure.
There's tech suitors. This ended up being a private individual, um, and wonderful experience. But it was kind of time to move on. And there was a group of people below this original founding group. Slowly, we had lost founders over a couple of years, and I was one of the last ones there. Me and another person, and we kind of decided it's time to move on because it then elevates this team below us. They had
Right.
ideas on how to run and steer the business from there. Um, and so I, stayed on to complete that transition. In the beginning of 22, I always had in the back of my mind, like, who are my first 5 phone calls? When I go
Yeah.
back on the job market, who am I going to network out to? And I knew I wasn't, ready to hang it up and retire. I was wanting to do something I really wanted to do. It was actually easier to define what I didn't want to do
Yeah,
than
for
what I
sure.
did. Right.
It's a good
And
place to
so,
be in.
oh, it was wonderful. And that to me is what true freedom is. And, so I interviewed at AWS, Amazon. I didn't want to sell cloud. That wasn't that
Yeah.
interesting. But a wonderful company to work for at a scale that would have been amazing. But then I found this company, Flawless, and I had heard of them being in the animation space when they first were founded in 2018 and started going out there. And they have this amazing technology that basically can allow actors on screen to appear as if they can speak foreign dialogue. So rather than dubbing a film, you're visually translating a film so
Yeah.
that, De Niro and Tom Cruise, they can speak German and Japanese and Korean,
Right.
like the audio sounds right, but now their mouth movements match up. So then it gives you this more sort of immersive experience. And they've been working on the foundational science and technologies to basically make this happen and
Hmm.
convert an entire TV show or film. And they were just bringing sort of the products and services to market. So when I joined about a little over a year ago, the goal there was, kind of do an audit of what we had and what's the best way to sort of tackle this and package all this up. And it's kind of funny. I remember talking to the two founders and saying, look, you guys are going to hire me for my failures, not my successes, because all the things I just did over the last 15 years, you're not going to have to do again. We're going to be able to have
Yep.
such a refined approach to just cut through the things that we don't want to do. And
Yeah.
there's a bunch of decision making. Like when you're a founder, it's just constant every day's
Yep.
decisions, right? And so being decisive in all those things, but you got to surround yourself with a wealth of talent. And the leadership team that was coming on to Flawless at the time was phenomenal. 10, 15 years plus experience
Yeah.
in every domain. So, and not everyone kind of knew each other. Most people didn't. And like, I didn't
Hmm.
know anybody, which was this fascinating environment. Everybody, you're just there to perform, like just
Right.
do my thing. And so I accepted in December of 22,
Hmm.
literally a month before ChatGPT hits, right? And AI becomes the thing, the behemoth, massive thing
Breaks
that
the
it was.
internet.
Yeah, and I had been working in AI for 15 years, so I wasn't like scared of it. I understood
Sure.
fundamentally how it's built and how it evolves and how it becomes a tool for really, useful things. And then obviously this sentient, Skynet comes out in January where everybody's just like scared of the hell of it. And I've seen that, right? I mean, that's firsthand seen why that is scary and things
Sure.
that are fundamentally shifting in every business. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll say that less, because I'm curious on your thoughts and questions about it. But the one thing that we say internally, somebody told me was like, um, AI is not going to take your job. Somebody that knows AI is going to take your job.
I, you know what, I, I said that. So I shot a video the other day. I want to say it was actually on the podcast. So I had it was actually maybe one of your episodes that we kind of shift and we have that happen. I mean, our podcast is growing and it's something new that we started fairly recently. And it was just a way for us to connect with other business leaders and owners, and then also express that kind of don't do this, but do this, and just glean knowledge. But we started that. And I want to say it was just a couple of weeks ago that I did. I kind of threw the camera on. I was like, we're going to talk about, mostly Chat GPT. And I walked through it and I was like, look, this is how it can help you do these different things. If you're a business owner and you're kind of struggling to find time, or even if it's a revenue thing, like you don't have the money to hire someone like me or our team or a VA for that matter, here's little simple things you could do to help you But the thing I kept kind of relying on was like, it is a tool, and it can be a really good tool if you train it the right
Hmm.
way. It
For
also
sure.
still needs some level of human interaction. It's not perfect. It's not going to solve your problem. There are some people who are 100% copying and pasting right into their blogs and right onto their social media posts, and you can tell, or people like me could tell, you could tell. But it is a tool, and I completely agree with you. I said the exact same thing. I was like, do I think that AI is stealing people's jobs? No. But are there people who are going to understand what AI is and how to utilize it that absolutely can take some of those jobs? Like, yes, 100%. Yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment. Is I don't think people should be scared of AI. I think that they should be scared of not understanding AI and not researching and learning what AI can do for them in all facets. It's not ChatGPT is scratching the surface. It's like looking at what even you guys do, which I have a couple questions there. I think is just interesting and people would like to hear, but there's just so much. I mean, I'm even looking
Yeah.
at, I've been in Photoshop since I was 8 years old,
Yeah.
messing around and going in there and looking at generative fill now. And you can go and select and say, I want this to be in a lollipop forest. And it's like, boom, like all, and there's, little tweaks and edits there, but it's almost perfect. And it's just wild. The things that used to take me 20 hours to sit there and do to make that look right, it's done in a minute. And there's a little bit of touch up work, maybe still a little bit of human element to it, but it just expedites that process, and it makes it work a whole lot better. And that's, again, even generative fill is scratching the surface. There's so much more that's out there. And that leads, I
Yeah.
guess, to one of my questions. So like with what y'all do with Flawless, give me perspective on the previous solution, which was dubbing. How much, and I don't know if this is even the selling point, I mean, but it has to be part of it. How much time slash money are y'all saving folks from like having to do that? Like if they're wanting to take, like we've got this US made sitcom, but it's super popular in Korea, but they would rather watch it this way. I'm not a huge fan. I watch movies with subtitles. Like I watch Squid Games, and I watch the subtitles and the whole 9 yards. My wife is not a fan. If it's, dubbed or subtitled, she's not a fan. She doesn't like it. She'll watch it with me. But that being said, like something like that, to go and take a production, whether it's a multi-series with a bunch of episodes or it's a single movie, what kind of time and money are y'all is that part of the solution?
Yeah, it is. I mean, fundamentally, we solve two problems. One is the cost of production is rising, right?
Yeah,
It's getting out, not out, it's getting out of hand. It's a highly inefficient process.
sure.
It's insane. If people actually understood, I always said it in being in animation. If kids knew what it took to make a cartoon, they probably wouldn't like them too much because
Yeah.
it's crazy. But and then the other big thing is expanding audience reach. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you talk about sort of solving the current problems with dubbing as an example, dubbing and subtitling is kind of the two standards. And there is an art to subtitling and dubbing that currently exists. We think it's inferior to true what it's trying to solve, but like
Sure.
if you actually understand the process of dubbing, it's nuts. What they have to do right now is they adapt the script. So they take the script from TV show, film X, and they adapt it to whatever language. The adaptation process is actually, they have to fit the new language into the mouth movements of what's appearing on screen. So if I'm speaking English, the German, the Korean, the Japanese has to fit into English mouth movements, which
Mm-hmm.
clearly, like, they have different sentence structures. There's different, a language like German is really, really long. But they've crafted this process over decades
Mm-hmm.
to sort of figure out how you tell the German version of this story. Well, it's so limiting on sort of the immersion part. And even the best dub is kind of good enough. Like talking to these studios, they kind of get in your room and they're like, it kind of looks like it sinks. And sometimes it really hits because the right word matches with the right movement. And then other times it's like, whoa. And so you kind of have to suspend belief a little bit and just kind of sort of sink in, or you're
Yeah.
subtitling, you're just reading, which is just
Right.
pulling you out of the story. You're just looking at words, and the cuts are going to happen faster than you can kind of keep up. And so the goal of what we're doing is to create a native language experience. It just feels like you're watching, if this is we're working on I'll take a good example of a Swedish film right now. It
Mm-hmm.
never would have made its way to the US. It just would
Right.
not have been a project. It's a foreign film, but it's fun. It's really just a fun picture. Well,
Right.
so I saw the subtitle version of it, I saw the dub version of it, and now I've seen the visual translation, where all of the on-screen actors, which was fascinating, the cast actually were all bilingual. So they gave a
Mm-hmm.
Swedish performance on screen, and now they've re-recorded in English, and now we're able to sort of see both of that, and it is a different film. It is
Yeah.
a
Oh, I can.
fundamentally different film. You really connect with the characters and see a story in a different light, and um, it's coming to market, and it will be. groundbreaking and changing, and it's using technology to make that possible,
Yeah.
which is just a really fascinating sort of journey that we're about to go on for the next couple of years.
How's the how do you market that? Like, and with y'all, with what y'all do, what was, I mean, and obviously you came into something that was existing and took a role there, but what is that role? I mean, are you going to filmmakers? Are you going to studios? You know, like just for those that wouldn't even know how that process would even work, you know, maybe someone that's interested in the entertainment space in any facet, what does that even look like? How do you get that in front of the right people outside of like, here's a YouTube video, you know, like how do you, how do you get it in front of the right people?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we have the right people internally to get in the right rooms, I'll say. But
Sure.
when I talked about like sort of how is the problem currently being solved, there's a very well established studio, distributor, filmmaker ecosystem that we
Mm-hmm.
can go then build the right relationships and the right partnerships to then go scale to, whether it's the studio side or indie filmmaking side, right? Like there's lots of different partnerships we can form as we
Sure.
roll this out there. And so that's all clear, right? I mean, coming from Faceware, where we were, we went through the whole VR boom in 2016 and saw sort of one of the biggest challenges VR had is when Facebook bought Oculus for $2 billion. Like there was this
Mm-hmm.
gold rush of content, but there wasn't enough headsets and distribution channels in the market. You could have made the best VR experience in 2017 or 18, but then it was so fragmented on where you released that to make your money back that
Mm-hmm.
then you went through this huge disillusionment. And then all that VR energy shifted to this metaverse energy.
Right.
And metaverse is really like, where do you monetize there? Like you have to create, I mean, there's some things that are happening. They're really interesting, but
Sure.
it's not crystal clear, like selling into filmmaking and television, which is a 100-year-old industry.
Right.
So it's just all these things, like when you're evaluating how to sort of build your business and grow your business, there's a couple really interesting things I would go back to as principles for anybody growing their business. You grow your business fundamentally two different ways. You grow your business by growing more customers, right, and adding more people to the fold somehow through more sales channels or whatever, or you grow
Mm-hmm.
within your customers. So you take a look at your current customer base and do we add products and services to then sell to those people that you've already sort of roped in a little bit.
Right.
And those are two very easy ways to grow, and you can do both at the same time.
Sure.
But it's really hard to just get more customers because some service-based businesses have capacity challenges. They don't have enough people or they
Yeah.
can't handle enough. But can you add on additional services to that, right?
Yeah.
That are complementary or for whatever reason, and then you can get true revenue growth in both those ways. And so what we're building now is sort of these larger growth strategies on our group going to market.
Sure. No, I think that's and what y'all are doing now, it's a little bit of both in my opinion. And it's like what I mean by both is you are a better mousetrap, but you're also something totally brand new, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So I
Yeah.
see it on both. It's like I see that they're going to look at it kind of in both avenues and be like, it's definitely better than what we were doing now. It looks better because I'll tell you, I mean, talking about just subtitles and even dubbing, it's like it's something that for someone that is into media in a certain degree, I see those things. Like I pay attention to quality. I pay attention to the quality, honestly, even of the dubbing or the subtitles. Like I'll watch some that it's just night and day difference. You mentioned language, like depending on where the movie actually came from, is like you notice, but and it stands out. And it
Mm-hmm.
absolutely does. I think it pulls people completely, and you can use this as a testimony if you want in the sales video, but it pulls you out of the movie because a movie in and of itself, like you talk to people who are just movie nuts, and it's the visuals, it's the transitions, it's the lighting, like it's all of it. It's an experience of why people go and watch a movie, whether it be in theaters or it be at home or whatever it may be. Like it is an overall experience, and any piece of that is off, it pulls you out of that experience. And I would assume for most of these filmmakers, for the actors, for everyone that's involved in it, is they go, we don't want to take the chance. Like this is the difference between this kind of nomination and these types of awards and these types of things. And the alternative, like, yeah, it was good, but it was dubbed, and it was distracting. And I think that they want any way that we could make this thing better. And obviously you're talking about people who are on the edge of technology for the most part anyways, when it comes to filmmaking and animating and audio and lighting. Like they're already watching for the trends, and if not inventing the trends for these films. So I mean, for them to be watching on the back end of this emerging technology, I don't know why they wouldn't want to be interested if it's going to make the overall end user, being the viewer, their experience better. I think it just totally makes sense. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like to me, it seems like y'all have an easy sell. I'm sure it's, maybe not as easy as it sounds, but it sounds like y'all have an easy sell.
Yeah, I mean it is and it isn't, right? I mean any new change in process
True.
is a big consideration, right? I mean there's risk, right? I mean tolerance is always a big thing, especially with technology, right? I mean is this
Yeah.
proven? Is it unproven? How long does it take? Those kind of things. But what's fascinating, I mean, cinematic storytelling, right? They've crafted this. They understand how this works. Like what does the edit need to be, the pacing of it, the casting of the actors, right? What shot selection, right? All of the environmental and production design, like all of those things aren't really changing, to use our technology, but
Sure.
you still have to embrace the art of it,
Yeah.
and sort of understand like why is that such like it's one thing if we're selling to content creators on YouTube. It's another thing when you're selling to a major studio,
Yeah.
right? That's just working at a different budget scale with hundreds of people to make these projects. So
Right.
there's definitely we've got our work cut out for us on how we get that adoption and those traction points.
Sure.
But it's exciting, right? I mean, it's pretty rare when you how do you impress people that are generally on that cutting edge,
Right.
right? And I learned this at FaceWave when we were doing groundbreaking, like real time animation was like coming onto the scene in 2013, 14. And it's like it's not often when you go into these big conferences that these conferences where you get basically the brightest minds in the world together. And how do you
Mm-hmm.
impress that group? And I've seen that a
Yeah.
handful of times in my career. And you show them something they've never seen before in a very
Mm-hmm.
real way. You actually get those sort of pause moments that like I've taken the air out of the room a couple times in my career where I've seen the people from our companies go up on stage and present something,
They're
and
like,
it's
wait a
just this
minute. Say what you
magical
just said
moment.
again, but slower.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, and it's I mean, to me that's kind of the best parts of entertainment,
Sure.
of being able to sort of entertain people. But how do you entertain the people in the industry making the things is sort of this other
Yeah.
sort of these special things that you tap into. So I mean, I've learned a ton on sort of just how to approach a market, scale, a user base, scale a community, scale a company.
Yeah.
And I've also learned how a lot of ways to not do that, in the
Sure.
career. And that's the wisdom of the 25 plus years. And
Right.
I've had the good fortune of working on a ton of really high profile, Academy Award winning projects, games of the year. FaceWare had been twice nominated for Scientific and Technical Academy Awards, which are really an assessment of impact on the industry. That's
Sure.
really where those awards sort of come from.
And for those that don't
Um,
know, I'm assuming that I mean that's prestigious. Like that's not just like, oh, he's employee of the month. Like that it's
Yeah,
bigger than that.
I mean, it's one of those accolades I will tell my kids, right? Is
Sure.
one of those things that is just special. And it wasn't me, it was the company at the end of the day and all
Sure.
the people that were there to get those efforts. But seeing a part of that process and helping lead that team is very massively validating to what's possible.
Do
And
you have
working on
a
all these,
oh go
yeah,
ahead.
I
No,
was
I
just
like
say
it.
working with all these really high profile projects and titles and stuff, you get a little numb to it, but you kind of look back, right? When I was starting my job search, you look back and I've done some really awesome things with, every major game franchise that you could ever name. When we just worked with all of them, because we were such a powerful
Well, I
tool
saw one
for,
on your
for game
bio, and
making.
that's a good one. I told you as we got on. I mean, obviously, some of the ones that stood out were, Halo. You mentioned that, Madden, of course. I mean, any kid that grew up, I'm a gamer. Like I grew up playing games. I still play them to this day. It's like my little relief. I can go sit there and just hop on with some friends or something. But you mentioned Call of Duty, and I mean, and I know that's a huge community. I mean, so I guess because people are going to want to know now that I just said that, what did you guys do for Call of Duty? What did you guys do for Madden? I mean, that's cool stuff because we
Yeah,
talked about the film side.
yeah. The gaming side was fascinating. I wasn't a huge gamer growing up, but like the tool that we had would animate faces quickly.
Okay.
And so because of that, like any cinematic storytelling game, so a lot of the open world games, so early working with Rockstar, right, on all the
Mm-hmm.
Grand Theft Auto games, Red Dead Redemption, right, like yeah, they had a lot of facial animation in those games. So we sold
Right.
tools to the game developers. Call of Duty was a fantastic franchise. Any of these sort of annual franchises that come out year over year were fantastic customers of ours.
Sure.
Because they just, some of these teams their animation teams would be 15, 20 people, and they had to animate several 100,000 lines of dialogue. And with those games, the Call of Duty and sports titles are very humanoid characters.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted a level of believability in there in your storytelling. And so that's where we were able to get really massive market share by going after those developers. And they're all wonderful, wonderful teams. And they have, you have a challenge like how do you make the game different this version, right? And like, I mean, if there's plenty of criticism every year.
Of
But like
course.
from a game development standpoint, like they have a really tight cycle to be able to make those iterations and changes. And something like animation, like that's not a great spend of their resource. So they look to technology and tools, motion capture, ping pong ball suits and stuff to really
Hmm.
bring efficiencies to how they make things. And once you sort of open enough doors, we had enough street cred and brand to then get into more and more, and then work on some really, really fun titles.
Yeah.
It's just a fascinating industry to get into, that's not going away. When people are out of work, they play games. So
No. Yeah. I
it's
completely
going to
agree.
scale,
I mean, and
to
it's
a really
changing
big
too. I
level.
mean, like you mentioned the metaverse and those types of games. I mean, even that it's just changing. I mean, obviously we've had mobile gaming and all those things for a while. I mean, but when you talk about consoles only going to continue to push the envelope. I can only imagine what that type of gaming. Already looking at what like the Oculus does for gamers, if they can, hold physical boxing gloves in their hands or a rifle or whatever the game is that they're playing, or dentist tools. I mean, like anything they can do. I can honestly, it because I'm a nerd, I really am like looking and thinking about when my children have children, like what that's gonna look like. And you already see the ones where like you can go to the malls and you put on the little haptic suit, and and you're able to get even more in the game. No one can afford that at home, right? I mean, maybe some people can afford it at home. I mean, but
Yeah.
you have the walk track pads and like all of it. Just thinking about where that's going to go over the next 10, 20 years, it's really mind blowing. I look back and think of like Sega Dreamcast, and I go back even further in Super NES, and like we were like, look at the graphics, and now
Yeah.
it's just a totally different landscape, of looking at it. And it's funny to even look at some of those older games and go, man, we played this. Like it's
Yeah.
wild. Like this is what we had, and it was groundbreaking technology back then.
Yeah, it's I mean, it'll ever that whole industry is propped up on doing it differently and doing it better than the last
Sure.
one, right?
Yeah.
And so it's I think that cutting edge of innovation, right, in entertainment is gaming, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
so many other interesting things happening, but they pride themselves on that, and they push the envelope, and all the hardware manufacturers love them because they move a lot of chips.
Yeah.
Um, but it's seeing the early augmented reality stuff like the Apple Vision Pro, like you can be critical at all day long, but you see glimpses of what this can be. And I saw this with the
Absolutely.
HoloLens that Microsoft had. And we worked on a game with Microsoft called Fragments. And it was this
Hmm.
really cool, you basically, it scanned your whole house, right? When you'd walk around, it scanned your house. And then the game, as it played out, it would basically introduce different elements of the game in your house. So I had to like walk around the corner, and there would be like a console. I had to like plug in, some coordinates or whatever to get the next clue.
Yeah.
And then I would walk back around the corner, and it would know in my living room if I had a couch or a chair. And then the characters that were going to tell me the next mission or whatever were either sitting on my couch or in my chair. Now the graphics were like PS2 quality,
Sure.
but the immersion of basically playing back through this game in my environment. And if I went over and played it at my buddy's house, his room's going to look different than mine.
Yeah.
And so, but it gives you this sense of replayability because it's so different. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. And now I'm starting to see in Apple Vision Pro, the graphics are getting better.
Oh yeah.
Like broadcast TV is fundamentally different. Like some of those videos where you're watching people, watch Formula One, and they
Hmm.
literally like on their coffee table, they have the track and the cars going
So
around. You
cool.
can click on the car and see the in-car camera. Like everything is moving in this direction. Into your kids, like it's going to be insane because all of these
Yeah.
things are this convergence of technologies is just going to make a really bright future. I'm a consummate optimist, but I see the good
Yeah.
in these
Same.
things.
Me too.
I think there's plenty of bad actors, but there's a lot more good actors.
Yeah.
And you just give these companies a chance to put these technologies on display, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I've got a couple more questions for you. Then I'm gonna let you get back to selling
Sure.
animation software and all that fun
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But so two things. What was your favorite project you've ever worked on? And number two, what is your looking at animation? Because that's just kind of where you come from. Your favorite, if you had to look back and go, this was iconic or historic or your favorite, something you maybe gleaned from and went like, this is just, I love the way it was put together. I love the technology that was involved. But those are two things I wanted to ask you. And I got a couple more and then we'll wrap up. But yeah, just your favorite project you worked on, and then just something that you've always looked at and gone, that's incredible. That's just something that I pulled something from.
Yeah. I think my favorite project, I mean, it was just one of the biggest things I had worked on early in my career was The Curious Case of Benjamin Button,
Mm-hmm.
which was a fascinating project. And it was a great use of our technology. working with Brad Pitt and David Fincher. I mean, it just didn't get bigger than that. And we were working with a big visual effects studio called Digital Domain.
Hmm.
And um, basically, we over prepared for that project. And we planned on shooting Brad's performances in 10 days. He shot them in 6 days. We we worked on about 300 shots. So the first 50 minutes of the film where he's old, that was like we digitally replaced his whole head.
Right.
They were sort of smaller actors, and they replaced it with like old Brad. And so there was 300 shots that we did, and we planned on each shot would need about 7 iterations to get approved through David Fincher and Digital Domain, and we ended up averaging 2 iterations per shot
Oh,
because
wow.
we just built these really nice efficiencies. So from a pure production management standpoint, I geeked out because we finished ahead of schedule.
Knocked it out of
We
the ballpark.
ended up better quality, and ended up getting the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects that year in 2008.
It's
And it
incredible.
was just working with wonderful talent. I met a gentleman named Paul Griffin, who was our he'd come from like Weta, and he was doing a lot of stuff on Lord of the Rings in the King Kong movies. So
Hmm.
he'd been in the rooms with some of the most talented people in our industry, and so we got a chance to sort of see what it's like to work at that level. And he pushed our whole company to places we never would have seen. So it was a really special project to manage, to be a part of, to work with such incredibly talented people. So yeah, and then I think your second question was probably my favorite animation, or
Yeah,
what?
just
Yes,
something. I guess something that you've just seen over the years. I know I like went back to Toy Story, as an outsider looking at it and seeing how early on it was and what they did. I mean, and I'm sure there were others for those of us that aren't in the know, but just something I guess you looked at and you were like just blown away at the
there
technology or the
was
execution.
there was two. So what's
Okay.
fascinating is Toy Story came out the year after Lion King.
Yep.
So Lion King was the height of 2D animation. I mean,
Hmm.
animators were getting like several $100,000 signing bonuses coming out of Lion King because
Yeah.
it was so big. Well, then I remember as a kid watching Toy Story and be like, "This is different. This is really cool." And you watch it today; it doesn't. I mean, it holds up, but the
Sure.
story was what was amazing. That's
Yeah.
what they absolutely nailed. But I would say my absolute favorite 3D film was Cars.
It's a
Cars
good one. It's a
was
really good
just
one.
I don't know, I've shown my son already 2 or 3 times. He's big into cars. He's 5, so he
Oh
loves
yeah,
that stuff.
he's
It's like, but just the storytelling of it, like all the nuance, all of the subtle details that are in the backgrounds and in the story making. Like I'm,
yeah.
big racing fan, and it was really special. And at that point, I can't remember when Cars came out, 2005, maybe 6, somewhere in there.
Sounds right. I was thinking 5, 6.
Yeah. It was, I had worked in 3D animation, so you have this appreciation for the art and the science and the engineering to create something like that. And
Yeah.
I mean, Pixar was doing it better than anyone at the time. And
Sure.
it just, you have an appreciation for it. And then the story is where it connects for me personally. Like that's where it's just transcends time. And it still holds up, right? It's
Yeah.
just this wonderful
Cars is
film.
a great movie, and we've watched. I've got girls, so they're less interested in the vehicles and stuff like that. But we've watched them all. We've watched
Yeah.
all the Cars. We've watched the Planes movie. Like we've watched them all. And it's a good franchise, good stories too, obviously. But no, that you're absolutely right. I didn't even think about Cars honestly. I guess just because it was, yeah. I don't even know why that one come, but it's an incredible film. And again, I look at things on what we do from a marketing aspect, or we shoot video. It's mostly for the purpose of ads and things like that. But I judge that when I see other works and I go, that's an incredible ad. Some people look at it and go, it's stupid, it's cheesy, it's whatever. Like, I'm like, you don't get it. Like, it's an incredible ad. I see what they're doing. And I would say that you're probably looking at it through that same lens of not only was a good story, which everyone could interpret it, but you're probably looking at the little nuances going, oh, look at like there's a shadow there, or there's this and there's that. Like just little things that probably
That's it.
we see it and we go, this is incredible, but we don't really see it. We don't see the little details that are in it that someone like you would sit back and notice and go, this is kind of mind blowing and really well done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you work in any of these fields, you stay close to it, right? When you lean in, and
Absolutely.
so you get an appreciation for it. But it kind of ruins movies a little bit. Like that's why I never wanted to work in sports, because I didn't want to ruin it for me, right? You just get really analytical about things, but you also have an
Sure.
appreciation for when it's done really well. And
No, absolutely. Well, I'm about to close out. First, I'm going to ask you one last question, but before we wrap up, I want to say thank you. This was awesome. I told you before we got started that I'm a little nerd. I'm a little bit of a geek. Not maybe to the extent, maybe you're more of a nerd or a geek. I don't know. It's just in our own lanes, but
yeah,
I geek out on this kind of stuff, and I was excited about having you on from the very beginning. So I just want to say thanks for taking some time out to talk to me, talk to our audience. But what I want to close with, and it's what we try to close each episode with, is from your experience, 25 years that you've been, in one business. One was, you started up, you're involved in that. There was an acquisition, then you jump into another one. If you had to summarize some of those things, those challenges of, pivoting models and different things, if you had to give an entrepreneur, business leader out there one piece of advice to take away from this podcast to go implement in their life or business, what would that be?
Yeah, and I appreciate being on this, TJ. I love these conversations. We nerd on them. That we could do a 4-hour podcast if we want to.
For sure.
I think the biggest thing is you got to get out of your own way. You put these problems, you put these hurdles in place, and I would say just these last few years, like massive over belief, right? Trusting my gut. The idea was there. There's a reason you founded a business.
Yeah.
You just got to lean in on it, and you can pivot a couple things, course corrections, right? Put a polish on it. But just keep making decisions and over believe, right? You're going to get a ton of bad advice along with a bunch of good advice.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of people just get in their own way, and they're afraid of success, which is kind of interesting to me. Like, why? But success is relative. You don't have to build a multi-billion-dollar brand.
Absolutely.
Right? Maybe you just want to provide for your family or provide for a team of people you enjoy working with, and then find a way to maintain that, right? If you want that lifestyle business, but get those problems out of your head because you're creating them. It's the committee meetings, right? You got all the too many committee meetings. So, it takes over belief. You got to trust what you're doing. Why else are you doing it any other way? And that's I would say fundamental to any business owner is
I agree.
Just
it's good.
Get those hurdles out.
I like it. Peter, man, again, I'm going to say thank you again. I appreciate you being on with us. And as I have to kind of wrap up, of course, hey, if you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, do all the things. If anything, look, at the end of the day, we want you to share this. That's what we honestly want. It's not about exposure for myself. It's not about exposure for Peter. If that's a byproduct, fantastic. But ultimately, we started this because I enjoy business. I enjoy entrepreneurship, and I want others that are thinking about it. I want to inspire a next generation of entrepreneurs, business leaders that want to watch this and go, man, it's still, the American dream is still possible. Like, there's still ways to make it happen. I just have to get out of my own head, and I have to keep pushing forward. And so I hope that inspires. And some of us that are out there, we all go through the moments where we're business owners, we're leaders, we have enough weight and family stress, like all the things. You can sit back and watch one of these episodes and go, that's what I needed to hear. That's what motivated me to keep going and go over. Everyone has hurdles. Every business, every person has hurdles, and it's about overcoming those. And we get to hear those different stories. So Peter, appreciate you, man. Thank you for tuning in, and
Thanks,
let's stay in touch because I want to hear some more nerdy stuff, and
For sure.
I want to see what you guys are going to do next. So I appreciate you being on, man.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you, sir.